Brother Carver. Now it's time for our guest speaker, and I'd ask Brother Glenn Morris if he can introduce our guest speaker, please.
Our guest speaker today is our State Secretary, Brother Andrew Vaccaro. Brother Andrew is going to talk about life as a member of the Knights of Columbus. Now, where Andrew ever found the time to get there and get involved is beyond me. He's always writing after midnight, catching up, and to be able to go to Hawaii and also attend a state council meeting from Hawaii, I thought was quite remarkable. But I'll let Andrew talk about the life as a member of the Knights of Columbus. Thanks, Andrew.
Reverend Father, Brother State Chairman, Brother State Councillors, Brother District Chairman, brothers. This has already been an extraordinary year for the Catholic Church. It was already starting off as a big year, 2025 being a Jubilee year, with all eyes on and all pilgrims on their way to Rome for the festivities. And then Pope Francis's health was in decline, and eventually we got the sad news of his passing on Easter Monday. Now we've had the joyous news of the election of our new Pope, Leo XIV. Those pilgrims in Rome for the Jubilee and upcoming canonisation celebrations have been blessed and have just witnessed a part of history that they never expected. Well, while those events have been unfolding, sorry about that. So while those events have been unfolding, I was taking part in my own Catholic pilgrimage, but in the most unlikely of places, which I planned for nearly a year now. Instead of travelling to Melbourne from Rome, my 2-week pilgrimage was in the opposite direction, sunny Hawaii. Now, when I joined the KSC at 29 years of age, 16 years ago, all I wanted to do was get more active at local parish level. I never imagined everything that followed, and could never have believed that I would travel halfway around the world to serve God in ways never imagined. Yet that is what has happened. After being active primarily at branch level as secretary for the first half of my time in the order, I became involved in state level activities such as helping to organise the annual Archbishop's Dinner. When the time came, I joined State Council as State Secretary, of which I'm in my 7th year. This has seen me travel throughout Victoria representing State Council to the branches. Indeed, in my time as Secretary, I've even attended most national meetings and conferences around the country, documenting most state centenary celebrations, including Victoria's. It's been an amazing experience getting to meet Knights from all over the country and have gotten to know many great men and women such as yourselves. Over the years, one of the great friendships I've made through the order has been with Paul Maple, who I've known for nearly a decade. There's Paul there. Paul is American born and spent over 20 years overseas in the US Air Force. In 2000 he converted to the Catholic faith and became an active member of the Knights of Columbus. He married Wilhelmina, who while born in the Philippines had lived much of her life with her family here in Melbourne. I first got to know Paul while he was living here in 2016 when I joined the Archbishop's Dinner organising committee, and we worked together for a few years and became friends. So that's Paul there, Carmen and some of the Dandenong North boys sorting out the raffle tickets at one of the Archbishop's Dinners, probably 2017 or something. In 2018, he and Wilhelmina moved to Hawaii, where he took up a civilian job at Joint Base Pearl Harbor Hickam, and has lived there ever since, having moved through different roles. He is presently an advisor to the US Indo-Pacific Command, the largest military command in the world, spanning Asia and the entire Indian and Pacific Oceans. He is also heavily involved in the Knights of Columbus there, having founded the joint base Pearl Harbor Hickam Military Council, Council 18025, in 2022, which is made up of active service personnel and civilian base workers. While back in Australia to visit family during Christmas 2023, Paul and I caught up and he asked if I was interested in joining the Knights of Columbus. I thought about the possibility of being a member of both organisations for a while, given their affiliation through the International Alliance of Catholic Knights, IAC. When Paul presented the opportunity, I decided to take it. The Knights of Columbus has 4 principles, or degrees, that are the pillars of its organisation. The first is charity, the second is unity, the third is fraternity, and the fourth is patriotism. I completed the requirements to achieve the first 3 degrees very early on, and was very keen to undertake the famous 4th degree program, which features very prominently within the Knights of Columbus, with its members featured ceremonially in honour guards and in other prominent activities within the order, which I would like to see eventually introduced with the order here. It's a project that I want to develop. I knew this would require me to travel to the US, and there was no better location than Hawaii, a place of great cultural and historical significance, a place I've wanted to visit for a long time, and only 10 hours away. I finally took the plunge and booked my trip in January, my first overseas trip on my own, and my first overseas trip in 30 years. So there's Paul. My trip began on Easter Sunday, where I departed Australia in the evening. The intention of landing in Honolulu early Easter Sunday there, thus celebrating Easter twice in 2 countries and 2 hemispheres. After Paul picked me up, our destination was the Holy Family Parish Church in Honolulu, not far from Pearl Harbor, to celebrate Easter Sunday Mass. After Mass, Paul introduced me to his boss, Admiral Samuel Paparo, along with his wife Maureen and his 2 youngest children who had attended Mass. Admiral Paparo is also a member of the Knights and of the same military council that we are both members of. They were wonderful to talk to, and we talked about Australia, which he has visited a number of times, as recently as a few months ago. It was later that evening that we heard the sad news of Pope Francis's passing, something that I hadn't expected when I planned my trip. We followed the news coverage for a few hours. While there, the Diocese of Honolulu held a memorial Mass on Monday, April the 28th, which we attended. It was a beautiful Mass at the Co-Cathedral of St. Teresa the Child Jesus, with a full attendance. The Knights were heavily involved, with the 4th degree honour guard featuring prominently. So these are some of the photos from that memorial Mass to Pope Francis. That's the Knights of Columbus 4th degree honour guard. We also, there's the honour guard. We also got to watch his Requiem Mass on television live. So one of the main highlights of my Hawaiian pilgrimage was my installation as a 4th degree Knight, which took place on Saturday, April 26th at the Admiral of the Pacific Fleet's boathouse at Pearl Harbor, a location off limits to most people, which houses the Admiral's yacht, used to show dignitaries around the harbour. The exemplification ceremony took place about 2 hours after the Mass, and featured a presentation of various examples of patriotism in the Catholic way, drawing heavily on examples of American Catholic patriots and saints, and how they have positively contributed to society. So again, they're the members of the 4th degree honour guard. There's some of us think I'm over there. So the ceremony featured patriotism as only America can, with the Star Spangled Banner sung proudly and the Pledge of Allegiance proudly recited. It was a moving ceremony, one which might be considered over the top by many Australians, but I've always admired American patriotism, and while many Australians may mock it, and it can be over the top at times, it is great to see their love and pride of country knowing their strengths and weaknesses. I was one of over 20 installed, so the gentlemen, most of us up here, were all the installees at the 4th degree ceremony, so there was about 20 of us, a number who were serving military. While I was undergoing this great honour on behalf of the Knights Columbus, I was thinking about my fellow Knights back, so that's me about to be installed as a Knight. That's me at the Admiral's Boathouse. There's a map of the Indo-Pacific Command. You can see Australia in the background there. And that's me walking past the Honour Guard after I'd been installed as a 4th degree Knight. So while I was undergoing this great honour on behalf of the Knights of Columbus, I was thinking of my fellow Knights back here who were making their annual Divine Mercy Sunday pilgrimage to Northern Victoria for our annual post-Lenten Mass and get-together Barney's Picnic, which I sorely missed, but I was happy to see it was such a successful outing. The ceremony featured existing 4th degree Knights, including Paul, in their uniforms, and so I'll go back, and with their swords, igniting we inductees, as you see there, dubbing us Sir Knights. It was an honour I couldn't believe I was receiving in a location few are able to attend, among some great people. On February 22nd of this year, the 4th degree celebrated its 125th anniversary with a grand mass and exemplification ceremony at St Patrick's Cathedral in New York, and debuted the new rites of installation. I was installed just over 2 months later under this new rite. Following the ceremony, we had lunch outside the boathouse amongst the beautiful scenery of Hawaii. So that was outside. Did you gentlemen want to sit up there so you can see the slideshow? Is it just a good thing? Well, Glenn hasn't seen this. So my Hawaiian pilgrimage took on a number of facets. The Catholic part, the historical part, and the tourist part. The Catholic part was centred around the Knights of Columbus and the events they took part in, including a joint base Pearl Harbor Hickam Council meeting, where I met many of the base personnel members I had chatted with on WhatsApp for over a year. This meeting, which is in this photo here, was at the chapel at Hickam Air Force Base. So I was actually, like I said, I was actually on Hickam Air Force Base for that. That there is the most recent Grand Knight, branch chairman equivalent, Mark Berthelot. He's a colonel in the US Air Force. He only just got transferred to Miami about a month and a half ago. So a month after my trip, he was transferred to, or just over a month after my trip, he was transferred to Miami, and was promoted. In the meantime, was promoted from lieutenant colonel to colonel. Apart from the memorial mass for Pope Francis, the other mass we participated in was the 50th anniversary of priestly ordination for the Bishop of Honolulu, Larry Silver, on Friday, May the 2nd, once again at the Co-Cathedral. Born in Honolulu, Bishop Silver spent much of his early years in California, where he was ordained and spent much of his priestly ministry. He returned to the Diocese of Honolulu, which is suffragan to the Archdiocese of San Francisco, in 2005, where he was consecrated a bishop and was the principal sponsor of the cause of canonisation of St Damien de Veuster and St Mary Ann Cope, who both served the lepers at the colony of the nearby island of Molokai in the mid to late 1800s. It was a big event, and I was privileged to be a part of the 4th degree honour guard for the Mass. A big celebration was hosted afterwards for him, which was very well organised. That's tents outside, and then there was a celebration in the hall there. So all the priests, most of the priests of the Honolulu Diocese singing a song for Bishop Larry. So while I was in Honolulu, my parish, as I mentioned earlier, was Holy Family Parish near Pearl Harbor, whose pastor is Father Dario Rinaldi, a relatively young priest in his 30s. The Sunday following Pope Francis' passing, he gave a great homily paying tribute to him, and gave another great homily the Sunday before I departed on the upcoming conclave, noting that the media who claimed to be experts on it had no clue what they were talking about. I was told by Paul that he celebrates one of the last Sunday Masses in the world, as his 7 p.m. Sunday Mass is the last to be celebrated on that side of the international dateline. His father is also a member of the Knights of Columbus. Apart from becoming a 4th degree Knight, the main reason I travelled to Hawaii at this time was for the annual Knights of Columbus Hawaiian State Convention on Saturday, May the 3rd. It is identical to our own annual state conferences and featured much of the same structure. I noted the difference being that the local council delegates each elect each state portfolio holder, whereas we elect our state councillors who elect the chairman who decides the portfolio holders. Convention booklet, so if people want to have a look at it while I'm doing my presentation. I participated as a delegate of the Joint Base Pearl Harbor Hickam Council, which was a huge honour, and has now seen me as a delegate at Knights conferences at state, national and now international level. One of the guest attendees at the convention was the Deputy Supreme Knight of the Knights of Columbus Worldwide, Arthur L. Peters, who's the gentleman, the tall gentleman there, of Toronto, Canada, whom I spoke to on behalf of the KSC Australia and presented him with a KSC Victoria brochure and the past 3 copies of our print magazine, The Crusader. At the convention banquet that evening, so there's some photos from the convention, which is the equivalent of our state conference. There's Brother Paul Maple addressing the crowd there. There's one of the stalls. And those gentlemen are from the Knights on Bikes, which our brother Willem Morgan is also a member of, and is also a member of the Knights of Columbus. There's Deputy Supreme Knight Arthur Peters of Toronto, and there's myself with the Deputy Supreme Knight. That's it. All right. Now that's the so. Where am I now? At the convention banquet that evening, which is where we are here, I took part as a member of the 4th degree colour guard, which brought in the flags for that evening. You can see me on the end there with my ceremonial sword. Again, the honour, another honour, along with meeting so many of the knights who were absolutely wonderful to me. So there's me in my 4th degree uniform. Again, there's me as part of the honour guard. And I'll just do a brief display of the procession in with the flags and what's featured as part of the honour guard. That's the Hawaiian anthem. That there in Hawaii they sing the American national, the US national anthem, and then the Hawaiian anthem. So they're very big on ceremony and pomp in the US. So it was a really great honour to be able to do that at least once while I was over there. So another facet of and so there's some more photos from the banquet. There's Paul and his wife Wilhelmina. There was the outgoing state deputy, so the state deputy is equivalent to the state chairman, Randall Tom. When I spoke to him, he actually asked me about Cardinal Pell. He was quite knowledgeable of Cardinal Pell, and he asked me, and I mentioned that I'd been confirmed by Cardinal Pell all those years ago. So Yeah, he's now stepped down, so his term ended on the 31st of July. And there's the Deputy Supreme Knight. He's been given a ceremonial paddle by the Hawaiian State Council. That couple there, they spent some time in Melbourne, so I spoke to them about their time here, and I told them if they ever come again to let me know through Paul. That table set up there is common, particularly at service, US service dinners and things like that. It's a table for those who have passed, so for those who are missing. So there's Brother Paul Maple and Brother Mark Berthelot receiving an award on behalf of our military council for the distribution of scapulars, brown scapulars, which Paul's wife Wilhelmina makes, and so they won an award for the distribution of the scapulars. And that's a picture. So there, that's the table of the Pearl Harbor Hickam Military Councils. As I said, most of them are either existing service or past servicemen, or on base civilian staff. So, absolutely wonderful gentlemen. Absolutely great to get to know them. Now, another facet of my pilgrimage was historical, which was somewhat tied into the spiritual facet. I've long been a hobby historian with a particular fascination for the Second World War. Suffice it to say, the one date that continues to define Oahu, the island of Oahu, is the Day of Infamy, December the 7th, 1941. The Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor has been well documented, with Oahu being a virtual museum of the tragic event which changed the world. For many years I wished to visit these sites, and so did here, which was an enlightening experience. I did a full-day tour of the Pearl Harbor historical sites, which included the USS Arizona Memorial. And then that's inside the memorial. So that first photo is on the way to by boat. That's inside the memorial. That's the dedication plaque of the memorial. That's the wall of honour of those who served in the USS Arizona and died. That's the Arizona from up above. So you can actually see, there's the memorial, and you can actually see the outline of the USS Arizona underneath the waterline. And that's one of the towers. That's the boat that gets you there. That's the oil that still comes out of the Arizona 80 odd years on. So it still leaks oil 80 years on. And then the next site I visited was the battleship USS Missouri. So there's the Missouri, and the Pacific Aviation Museum. So the Arizona Memorial is a truly moving experience, which requires a boat ride to reach. You only get about 20 minutes at the memorial, so you need to make the most of it. The memorial sits just over the wreck of the Arizona, which lost over 1,000 souls that fateful day. So as I said, the ruins of that ship just sit underneath the waterline, an eerie reminder of that tragedy, and again, where oil still seeps from the ship. The USS Missouri was equally amazing. For those history buffs, the deck of the Missouri is where the Japanese surrender was signed on September the 2nd, 1945, while in Tokyo Bay, overseen by General Douglas MacArthur and Admiral Chester Nimitz, whose statue features at the entrance to the Missouri, and featured the signing that day featured then General Thomas Blamey representing Australia. So to stand at the spot where the world's largest conflict concluded was another great honour. So this here is the deck where the Japanese surrender was signed. Now we're coming up to the 80th anniversary of that celebration in September on September the 2nd this year. So particularly on this 80th anniversary year, it was a true honour to be stood, and that's the exact spot where it was signed, where the table was. So the standing at the spot where the world's largest conflict concluded was another great honour. In fact, again, that's the delegation that oversaw the Japanese surrender. That's the spot that marks it, and it says over this spot on 2nd September 1945, the instrument of formal surrender of Japan to the Allied powers was signed, thus bringing to a close the Second World War. The ship at the time was anchored in Tokyo Bay, and it gives the latitude and longitude as well. And there's a picture of Sir Thomas Blamey, the later Field Marshal Sir Thomas Blamey, signing on behalf of the Australian Commonwealth. So, Missouri's role in concluding the Pacific campaign in World War II is the reason it is now permanently docked at Pearl Harbor, overlooking the Arizona. Which I should mention that US battleships were by convention named after US states. So, so it looks so now permanently overlooking the Arizona, the two bookends of the Pacific War, with the Missouri permanently standing watch over Arizona. So that was the beginning of the US involvement in the Second World War, and that's the end of the US involvement in the Second World War. The symbolism. I even got to see some of the buildings which still bear the scars of the Japanese attack, and got to touch those spots as Paul took me on a drive through the actual Joint Base Pearl Harbor Hickam, which required his security clearance past sentry points. So that was really an amazing experience, going where only security personnel were actual base personnel, and took me on a tour through both bases because they're both joined, and showed me where he lived where he and Wilhelmina lived when he was based at Pearl Harbor 20 years earlier. So I also had the privilege of attending the Anzac Day service at the National Cemetery of the Pacific at Punchbowl Crater, where I met up once again with Admiral Samuel Papara. So that's some photos from the ceremony, the Anzac Day ceremony, which was held a day later here, but because it was the 25th there. And so there were Australian and New Zealand personnel. There were plenty of Australian and New Zealand personnel there. And that's the Maori contingent doing a haka, New Zealand's contingent doing a haka. And so while I was there, I met once again with Admiral Samuel Papara. So that's Admiral Papara, who I got to meet who was introduced to on Easter Sunday. And as I said, he's a member of the Knights of Columbus, and he is the head of the world's largest military command. So his main focus is obviously China, India, the Pacific and the Indian Oceans. There were many Australian and New Zealanders, the military in attendance. It was humbling to take part in the ceremony which honoured the sacrifices of our servicemen and women halfway around the world, and note the respect with which the US regards our historical alliance. I also took the time to do some tourist stuff, such as spending the day at Waikiki, where I bumped into, does anyone recognise who that is?
Paul Roos.
Where I bumped into AFL legend Paul Roos, who noticed my Collingwood polo top, while visiting downtown Honolulu, where I also had the privilege of voting at the Australian Consulate, and I also visited the Cathedral of Our Lady of Peace from the outside. So that's the King Kamehameha statue. And I also got to visit the Cathedral of Our Lady of Peace from the outside. So that's the main cathedral of Honolulu. Now, unfortunately, that had only just closed a day or two earlier for a year-long renovations, so I didn't get a chance to go inside. I also got to visit some famous TV, and so that's the actual. So that cathedral is where Father Damien the Voosler, St. Damien of Molokai, was ordained, because he arrived on the island as religious, and he was ordained to the priesthood while he was there, and then was sent to Molokai to minister to the leper colony. Is that the audio? Give me a second. Oh, no wonder that's what the sound was. You need a second? Ah, crap. Let me look that in the way that happens. Apologies for this, gents. Technical difficulties always seem to arise. Come on. I'll stop. Just give me a second while I stop sharing. There we go. No wonder. So, now I'll stuff that up. Right, let's try this again. So, if you can hear the music in the background, that's the, so I got to visit some of my favourite TV sites. So that's from one of my favourite shows, Magnum PI. That's the beach where most of the series, a lot of the series are filmed. That's the actual Robin Masters estate. So I got to take that as well. That's me in my replica Magnum Aloha shirt, standing near the beach there. Any notice the resemblance? That's me in Magnum's Ferrari 308. Again, notice the resemblance. Now I also got the chance to visit or have a look at the Ilokai Hotel. Does anyone recognise that building? TV fans might remember it.
The one in front of it?
You'll remember it as that's the hotel that famous scene is shot from. So it was a privilege to go to those. And while I was there, was this going to work or not? I got to film, I got to film a sunrise in time-lapse mode. And the sunset across the Pacific Ocean. So given that I didn't have to travel too far, probably an hour, half an hour to an hour either way, I was able to film the sunrise on the east coast and the sunrise on the sunset on the west coast. Those were about 2 days apart, so it was a privilege to do that. Another privilege that I had, the highlight, was doing a helicopter flight over Oahu and a submarine ride off Waikiki.
That's Diamond Head, is it?
What's that?
Diamond Head, the mountain in the background of the previous.
Yeah. Yes, that's Diamond Head crater. Yep. Very observant. And that's the submarine ride. And then I got to do some other, and that's underneath the ocean. And they were both on the same day. I did the helicopter trip. And then some other fun activities. So this was an amazing pilgrimage on so many levels. I was enriched by my experiences with my Brother International Nights, which I hope to put to use here, and visit many of the sites I'd hoped to visit and experience. My only regret was not actually visiting the former leper colony that St Damien and St Mary Ann ran, which I was unable to organise in time. The next time anyone should visit Hawaii, note that it's not just a rich tourist tropical paradise, but it has a rich history and a rich Catholic cultural experience, which needs to be lived and explored. After 2 great weeks, it was finally great to be back home. So, mahalo Hawaii and aloha. Thank you, brothers. Now, does anyone have any quick questions about Hawaii or the Knights of Columbus and how they operate?
One quick, you said you had the 4th, you were inducted in the 4th section.
4th degree, yeah.
The degree, was there other degrees?
There are the four. Yeah.
So what does that mean? What's
It means I can take part in like the honour guards and things like that. And then they've got special projects as well that they undertake.
Well, I was over in a town fairly close to Vegas in Nevada, and on the nose board, it had quite a bit about the Knights.
Yeah.
So it was,
Well, you'll notice I'm wearing my Pearl Harbor Hickam Council polo shirt. Now that came with the American flag on there, but I stitched the Australian flag on there. So the experience was great. The Knights themselves were absolutely wonderful. They were very accommodating. I met a lot of them along the way, learnt so much from them. As I said, they were really good to me. They love Australians, and I met, as I said, I spoke with some of the members of the Hawaiian State Council to try and get more involved, so hopefully something will come of that in the future. I mean, there's only a 3 to 4 hour difference between us and Hawaii. They're a day behind us, but time-wise are only 3 to 4 hours ahead depending on the time of year. It's very similar to Australia, really. Hawaii, there's a lot of differences, but a lot of similarities. And the way the Knights operate, very similar way. Any other questions? No? Thank you very much, and I hope you learned something from that, brothers.